and thank you, Dan.
Sorry to interrupt. I would quite like to get a drink of water or something.
Please
carry on.
Carry on.
Is Bernadette here?
I don't know where
I think she's outside.
She's just nipped out. Yeah. Okay. I'm the acting CEO at Padley, and I'm also here today because I am a person with lived experience of mental health services, so I have a real passion for it anyway, and I'm also a member of Unite, so I'm here with 3 hats on right now. Padley. Most of you, if you're Derby-based, have probably heard about Padley. We work with 2 groups. Ardell talked about both of them. One is people with learning disabilities, which we do from our centre in Rutland Street. But tonight I'm going to focus much more on our work with the homeless cohort of people, because they're the people who are mostly affected or are going to be affected by the cuts in services. We are one of a lot of organisations in Derby that work with the homeless. We're not the only organisation, and I think that's important. I've left you with some literature about ourselves, but please be aware that there's a large raft of organisations. We are all working with the same people. We're all trying to achieve the same outcomes. But obviously, people choose, as they do with formal services, which services they're going to engage with. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the national picture and the impact of mental health on national homelessness, and some figures around that to help you in your debates and your arguments going forward. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about Derby as well. So I'm going to give you some figures now to think about. 200,000 people experience homelessness each year in our country. 200,000. Each night, 77,000 single people will be classified as homeless. Doesn't mean they're rough sleeping, they may be sofa surfing.
Sorry, can you repeat that number?
77,000 single people experience homelessness each night. They're not necessarily rough sleeping, they could be sofa surfing, they could be living in a squat. 17% of homeless applications made to the statutory bodies are declined as non-priority, which means there is no legal responsibility to home those people. Last year, 4,751 people were estimated to be sleeping rough on any given night in the UK. That's sleeping in a doorway on a park bench. And that was at the rough sleep account, which happens in November. We're about to do the Derby one in the next week or so. In 2010, which was before somebody mentioned austerity earlier, when austerity was starting to bite, that figure was 1,768. "30 to 50% of rough sleepers nationally are deemed to have a mental health problem. The general population, that runs at 25%. So within the homeless population, those people who are rough sleeping, those that nobody's going to help, they are twice as likely to have a diagnosed mental health issue. And when I talk a little bit in a minute about the people we work with, you'll see that that's hidden. The real figure is very hidden. What is most worrying of all is that 57%, that's over half of the people who would do a job like I do, have said that over the last 5 years, the incidence of mental health in the rough sleeper cohort is increasing. Despite the increase in services, despite the fact that all of the research that says they need these services, and the services like ours that engage with them, bringing in mental health services in to work with them, it's still increasing. There is a 5% reduction year on year in organisations like ours working with these people. There's less and less out there to support them. An 8% reduction last year in day centres alone. That's the places like we run at Padley for them to come in, have a cup of tea, exchange of clothes, go to the toilet. Think about it, when you're sleeping, just being able to go to the toilet, sit down quietly and have a cup of tea with friends. Last year, 8% closed. There's been a reduction in emergency bed spaces for this cohort by 3% in the last 12 months. Now, of those people that are accessing those emergency services, those hostel accommodation nationally, 34% of them have a diagnosed mental health condition. 32% have complex and multiple needs, which may include an undiagnosed mental health condition. 26% have drug issues, including the new NPS drugs, the zombie drugs, the Mamba, the Spice that we're all reading about in the press. 20% have alcohol issues. 13% have physical health issues that aren't addressed, that only escalate because they're homeless. And 8% have learning difficulties. The reduction in mental health services and other support services, organisations like our own that are working with them, and health services will make working with this community more challenging and means we will achieve less positive outcomes. So, how big is this problem in Derby? I talked about the national picture. In 2010, there were 4 rough sleepers counted in Derby. Last year, there were 43. This year, we're doing the count next week, we are anticipating it will be closer to 50. So despite the work that everybody's doing, the problem is increasing. At Padley, we offer a 12-bed hostel. We offer 12 men emergency accommodation when they need it. And whilst they're there, they engage with our services and we put a support plan in place and we are striving to achieve, we've just bought a new database so we're now able to monitor more scientifically the work that we're doing, and we're aiming to achieve an 80% of our cohort of men will have positive outcomes. Last year, in our hostel, we housed 169 men throughout the year. 21% of the exits from our hostel were for positive move-ons. So they were people who managed to turn their lives around and move on and sustain their tenancy. 80% of the evictions that we carried, because we do have rules, we don't tolerate everything, they were due to behaviours linked to their mental well-being. Our current cohort of 12 men, 4 have a diagnosed mental health condition for which they've all been sectioned at some stage under the Mental Health Act. And it's accepted that the other 8 all have some mental health challenges that are currently undiagnosed, that we're trying to get them to engage with services to have a diagnosis for. That's 100% of the men we are working closely with in our hostel have got a mental health issue. 35% of our residents have some ongoing intervention from some sort of mental health service. So managing and sustaining good mental health is a major challenge for us day in, day out. Because when you have people that have such behaviours and such issues, it becomes sometimes quite difficult to keep a lid on. It can escalate quite quickly as people trigger each other's issues. We also deliver a day centre, which is open 365 days a year. We're open from 8 in the morning till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The last hour of that is funded by our first speaker. He is our only public sector funder for Padley. Every other penny that Padley raises to deliver its services is done through the goodwill of the people of Derby. So thank you to anybody in here who supports us. At our day centre, people can receive a cheap, nutritious meal. It's not free. If we made it free, it would be worthless. It's £1. You can purchase Padley vouchers to give to homeless people so they can get a good meal rather than giving them money. They can have a shower, use the toilet, get a change of clothes, and most importantly, have some social contact in a warm, relaxed, safe environment. The best thing for anybody's emotional well-being is that sense of worth and being able to sit quietly and feel safe. Last year we also gave out just under 2,000 food parcels to people who were unable to feed themselves. All of our visitors to our day centre are encouraged to engage with our services, and again, we're striving to achieve 80% of all of those that engage with our services have a positive outcome. We use the WEMWEB's wellbeing measure as one of our measures of outcomes, which is a measure of emotional well-being that anybody who's gone into any sort of mental health service will have undertaken as part of their assessment. And we do that on a quarterly basis with our people now, so that we can make sure we're catching people and not letting their mental health spiral out of control. Of those day centre clients we currently engage with, which we have around 100 people a day visit our day centre, and around 70 of those regular visitors are now engaging with us on a regular basis, sitting down, having one-to-one support. And 30% of those have a mental health issue that's been diagnosed. 18% of them have been sectioned at some stage. 75% have an undiagnosed mental health issue. 35% again are having ongoing interventions with mental health services. So, what are we actually doing to help our people with their mental health? As I already said, we're giving them a safe space. We're giving them space also that if they're engaging with mental health services and don't want to travel to the hospital or to other places, because for some of our people, they don't have the means by which to get to these places, people can access the services at the Padley Centre. So we already have a CPN who delivers surgeries that anybody can just come in and have a chat, book in to see them and have an assessment. We also offer mental health services to come in and work with our people face to face. We also provide transport, if needed, in an emergency to access mental health services. So we do everything we can to ensure that our people get the help they need it when they need it. As I said earlier, we're one organisation in Derby. We're working with all of the other organisations and our public sector partners, such as Hardell and the police, through various initiatives to coordinate the response, so that we as a sector, working with homeless people, are actually achieving more for less. Because in the past, we've been very aware that, as with most other services, we're all working at the same, we're all open at the same time. So we're coordinating it so people can move around from centre to centre during the day and the night and get service 24/7 is the aim that we're all working towards achieving. So that our homeless people, whenever they're in crisis, have somewhere to go, somewhere in Derby. These cuts to the mental health services that are proposed, and it's often outreach and recentralising of the services that reach the most vulnerable that are the first to go, will make this cohort of people, those that are the most vulnerable in our society, the ones that everybody walks past every day in the high street, they are the ones who will suffer the most. They're struggling now to access services. They will struggle much, much more. And as our funding reduces and our ability to serve them reduces, this is a problem that isn't going to go away.
Lots of stuff that I didn't know. Obviously, we know generally about the problem, but hearing the detail. What I'd like is just a few questions, and then we go into the next speaker, yourself, Rosie, and then somebody at the back there. please.
So I think you did mention funding, and I possibly missed it. Could you just tell me again where your source of funding comes from, and also other similar organisations involved?
Okay. In Padley, our hostel, obviously we can claim housing benefit for our hostel residents while they're in residence, and that tends to self-fund itself. But our day centre services, we receive, it costs us £100 a day, an hour to keep our day centre open, to staff it, to provide food and electricity and heating. And we receive £20,000 a year from, to help towards that. We have various corporate sponsors. For instance, we only today, £17,000 landed in our bank account from Griffiths Foods. We're currently doing a campaign because on Sunday we offer soup and bread free of charge, and we did a corporate campaign to all of our corporate sponsors and said for £100, because on our Sundays we have one member of staff and it's volunteer led. So we're running a campaign for £100 to sponsor a Sunday. Everything else comes through our Padley 4000, which is on the back of the leaflets. That's your regular £2 a month direct debits. Around £80,000 a year we achieve from that. All of our other funding for us comes from the good people of Derby who donate to us. We're currently in the middle of our harvest. We have 300 schools and churches who donate their harvest Thanksgiving collections, whether that's food or money, to us. The food from the harvest allows us to feed 25,000 meals we prepared last year out of the harvest, because we have a team of volunteers who chop all the fresh produce and we freeze that and use it through the year. And then all the tin stuff is kept in day order and we use that as we need to use it. Our services at Rutland Street for learning disabilities are self-funding. People fund that through their personal budgets. But that barely washes its own face. It's not, we're not moving money around within the organisation. Other organisations in Derby, the Police and Crime Commissioner, Derby Homes and Public Health have all pulled together funding to coordinate this new coordinated approach. And they're currently working with other organisations who are not as well placed as Padley in the hearts of the people of Derby, and funding from that pot is going to them to support the area of the time of day that we're not open. So because Padley does so well at its fundraising, we're not getting the government funding basically. That's coming down from the 30 million that government talk about isn't reaching us. That actually has gone to promote what we call the REST team, which are a team from Derby Homes that are doing outreach. So they're going out into the community, finding people who are rough sleeping, signposting them to the services that are open at that particular time. There's also a team called the PEEP team. They're a little bit controversial, because they basically are the ones that are keeping the city centre clean of begging, and the people they get engaged with have generally been told that they have to engage with formal services or go to prison. So that's quite controversial, and we're trying to work with him to sort of change that thinking a little bit. But generally, at the moment, Derby is starting to wake up to its problem, and there isn't enough money to cover 24/7, 7 days a week cover. There isn't enough money being put forward by public services to cover 2 till 8 in the morning. Padley can manage just about to keep 8 till 2 open every day, but it's the other bit that the envelope, if you like, isn't enough for.
Thank you.
Does that answer your questions?
Wonderful. I'm going to take 3 more questions, and then I'm going to move on if you don't mind. So, Mickey, and then what your name is? Sophie. Okay.
Right, Chris Davis. Do you get food from Fair Share?
We do. We subscribe to Fair Share. For those that aren't sure what Fair Share is, it's the supermarkets with the food that's going out a day or unwanted food, and it all gets collected centrally and then split up between all of the charities that pay a nominal fee for it to come in. So yes, we get that as well.
Ricky?
Yeah, I was reading your leaflet about what you do with people that got addiction problems, homeless problems. I was once an addict, so I know what some of these services are about. I'm 15 years distant from that. I did some charity work years ago for St Mungo's and Sense Point in central London.
London, yeah.
But what I have got a great awareness of is like the Mental Health Act and getting people housing now. You may not be aware of some of the legislation where you can hold the local council to account to force people in the council to give housing. And once I'm done with this national inquiry that I'm dealing with, we'll leave you my details, and if need be, I'll come over and dedicate a little bit of my time, if that's the only way of assistance.
Thank you. Take a leaflet and then contact me. Fantastic. Just so that you're aware, we're actually moving into the area of what we call move-on accommodation. There's a great emphasis at the moment at reducing repeat homelessness. What's happening is we work with somebody, we get them to reduce their addiction issues, to get on top of their mental health problems, and then we move them into accommodation and go, bye, you're on your own. Hey presto, a few weeks later they spiral and they're back where they started. And in answer to your question, the reason that local authorities are not responsible for housing these people is they're deemed to be intentionally homeless because their behaviours have led to their homelessness in a lot of cases. So that's why they're that cohort that are not housed or not deemed to be priority. And what we're doing now is we're going to work with Metropolitan and we're going to take on 2 houses as shared houses. So when our gentlemen reach a certain level, we can handhold them for a further 6 to 12 months in a shared house with just another guy, so 2 of them share a house, and we'll carry on supporting them, and then they move on to hold their own tenancy, so that we break that cycle of coming back through our doors every other year or so. So there was one more question.
Yeah, Sophie.
Sophie.
Just going back to what you were saying about people being evicted from the hospitals, they are obviously having bad behaviours due to alcohol. What would necessarily warrant eviction, and what if you would leave afterwards?
Right. It's a difficult question and it's a hard answer, but we have to be careful because we don't want to enable behaviours. The whole point of the work that we do is to encourage people to make positive life choices. So when they're living with us, if they choose to behave in a way, maybe take drugs and bring them on the premises, or assault a member of staff, or assault a fellow resident, then we have a duty of care to everybody in that situation. They sign up to that arrangement, so they're asked to leave the hostel. That doesn't mean to say they can't come in through the front door into the day centre and still get the everyday support until they're ready to move on again. And then when they decide that they're contrite and they're sorry and they realise, and we've worked with them a little bit more, they get back on the horse and back into the hostel. So nobody's turned away completely, but if you're going to live in a hostel, there are rules. There has to be. You can't have 12 people living however they want. And it's not safe for our staff, and it's not safe for each of those. We have a duty of care to everybody. Does that answer your question?